Disclosure. Make sure your microphone stands are at the appropriate height so that you don't have to slouch when speaking. Okay. Real disclosure. Make sure you're following your local state health. Make sure you're following your local health authority guidelines when it comes to COVID. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to a certain governor in the great state of North Carolina, some COVID restrictions were loosened this past weekend. And really they came in the form of alcohol sales were moved from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., like the ending of alcohol sales. The 10 p.m. curfew was lifted. Bars without outdoor spacing could have up to 30% occupancy. And indoor venues of 5,000 people or more were allowed to open at 15% occupancy, which basically just means the Hornets are back. And if this past weekend was any preview of what's to come when quarantine is over, I could see how they would call it the Roaring 20s. Roll the intro.
I got problems on problems on problems on problems on problems on problems I solve them. I run through the money, the pressure be calling. Left on my blessings, I feel like I'm falling. The birdie is back, tell me I'm garbage. I'm going through something, that's why I ain't calling. Phone in progression, it's all that I wanted. The phone in affection, I summon and dub it. Cause I got problems on problems on problems on problems on problems on problems I solve them. I run through them.
Guys, this weekend was nuts. Mainly because I still don't know how to set up a microphone stand tall enough for me to talk to you guys and feel normal. But this weekend was insane because of all the restrictions that were lifted in North Carolina. And golly, when I tell you that you would have thought that like the state had like fully opened up, there was a buzz in the city. Pun intended. Charlotte Hornets, send me a check. But there was a buzz in the city. There was a different type of atmosphere in the air. And it was that of almost like a release. We'll call it that. Yeah. A release of sorts. Maybe stress, maybe people being cooped up, maybe something like that. But it was a release nonetheless. And when I think back to the idea of like the Roaring 20s, it's a time in Western culture in which, I don't know, you kind of associate it with loose morals, prosperity, wealth, people just having a good time. But it is because all these people had just come through the Spanish flu pandemic. So look at that. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things where you can see, at least I could, like, yes, I get it. Act responsibly. Obviously, make sure you're socially distancing still, make sure you're wearing your mask and stuff like that, which is why I told you at the beginning of the episode to follow your local health authority guidelines, mandates, restrictions, anything like that regarding COVID. Trust them to do their jobs. I'm not touching that one. But yeah, just listen to the rules. Outside of that though, gosh, I really don't know how to explain it. There was dancing, there was music, there was drinks. And for those of you that don't live here, obviously, what was going on beforehand was that any type of entertainment, especially for the demo that's a little bit more stubborn, a little bit more, a little bit harder to get them to adhere to the guidelines, my generation, there was this idea of like rapidly declining mental health because of a lack of socializing. So for those like myself that live alone, work from home kind of thing, I remember this time last year, like I was just starting quarantine and all that stuff, and about 2 months in, I was legitimately losing my mind. Like I think I was in a full-blown kind of depression, mainly because of the fact that like I had followed the rules like to a T. Your boy wasn't going out. Your boy wasn't doing anything. And it probably wasn't until Labor Day weekend or so, around then, where I decided, hey, let's try and go out. Let's venture out a little bit, especially because your exposure is zero, in the sense that, like, you live alone. Your risk is zero. You're in a healthier demographic. And yes, I'm not saying that I'm invincible to COVID, even though I've said it in previous episodes. But I am saying that for months and months of following all the guidelines and everything like that, for someone like me that wasn't going to come into contact with anybody in an at-risk population at first, I realized there wasn't really much of a point of me to just like shelter in place and keep myself from, I don't know, living life. Disagree. You can do that all you want. But yeah, it's kind of weird being alone that long. And I totally understand why prisons, camps, and all that stuff, there's this idea of encampments, I should say, this idea of solitary confinement, because things get pretty dark when it's just you, and it's only you. Humans are social creatures, be it as it may. But yeah, this whole idea of like staying home and all that stuff, and eventually you just get to a point where you say enough is enough. You take the risk, you calculate your risks, and you live your life moving forward. Listen, I'm not saying what I did is the best option. I'm not saying that what I did is the option that you should do. I'm just saying it's what worked for me, and till this point, thank God, knock on wood, any superstitious things that you guys want to talk about, I haven't been infected with the virus. Oh gosh, that could be a lot of things. I haven't had COVID. Tested 4 times for COVID, all came back negative. One time got super scary because I had a fever, but no COVID. Tested a couple weeks later after that one, like the scary one, the 4th one, for antibodies, still negative. The time I'd been tested for antibodies before then, also negative. But yeah, I get it. You eventually want to get to a point where you kind of just like have a release. And I feel like this weekend was that for a lot of people, especially in the state of North Carolina, but more specifically, the city of Charlotte. I can only imagine Raleigh was basically the same thing. We'll see. But in Charlotte, there was this atmosphere of fun, or of like, hey, we're kind of back more or less. When you finally give the people the ability to, let's call it release, you do get a lot of this kind of behaviors that lead you to believe, not even me, experts at Yale, sociology experts at Yale, that I'm not crediting right now, as I don't cite anything properly, no APA format, no anything like that. But this isn't a science paper. This is my opinion. But yes, there are even sociologists at universities that are predicting that a lot of this quarantining, maybe basically all of this quarantining and these restrictions on social life and stuff like that, when released, will bring into light a new era, much like the Roaring 20s. It might even get a little bit dicier. Let's call it that. Because, flappers and all that stuff, different than a societal norm. People are like, oh my God, could you imagine if flappers were what was setting people off back in the 1920s? What do you think's going to happen in the 2020s? We already had OnlyFans during quarantine, so I can't imagine what'll happen out in the streets. That's not for me to predict, but yeah, when you got to see this release, it was definitely a sight. We're talking dancing, we're talking music, we're talking drinks, shoot. We're talking a bunch of other things that I might mention later on in the episode, but it was one of those things where I get it. I would, you know what? If I was cooped up in my house all day because of a pandemic, and then eventually after a year or two, they said, hey, y'all can come back out, I would definitely dress up in suits all day. Hell, I might even wear a short flappy skirt. You don't even know. I know. We're not having that. You don't need to see that. But yeah, I get it. I get the whole thing. I get the idea of like acting responsibly and kind of making sure that you're not putting other people at risk, but eventually you get to a point where you start being selfish. But also, make sure you're taking calculated risk, people. There's no need to be acting recklessly, especially if you understand that like parts of your life do affect other people. There is a very small population of people that are like me, where you're not really at an at-risk population, but you're not really exposed to an at-risk population either. So you kind of gotta do what's best for you. You're all adults. No one's ever gonna like follow the same path, but just make sure you guys are acting responsibly. That being said, though, some shit was wild. Like, I saw my almost first drunk fight since quarantine. Listen, people don't know how to act. People really don't know how to act. Yeah, we could do that. Never gonna see them. I saw married people acting like they were not married. And I was like, yo, that probably had nothing to do with COVID, but also, if you married, can you at least act married? And you know, everybody that's listening to this right now, everybody within the sound of my voice that can hear this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've made it this far into episodes, even if you've made it this far into this episode, you know that I'm not talking about like, oh, you got to be some saint kind of thing. But there is I don't even think it's a fine line. I think there's a very thick line between acting single and acting as if you're in a relationship. And yo, I don't know if it's the quarantine or being out or doing whatever, but like, just act accordingly. But all in all, it was a good time. It was definitely a time to be had, a time to rejoice, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it was definitely a time. I don't want to say it's a movie because it wasn't a movie. It was basically like what you would expect a place would be at its capacity, not full capacity, but like at its government mandated capacity, but with people having a grand old time. And honestly, every place felt like a VIP booth. I'm not going to tell you where I went because mind your business. It's my life. But yeah, side story though, yo, I'm still not going to tell you where I was, but dude, there was a DJ at the place. First of all, homeboy, I'm not trying to judge, not trying to be prejudiced, anything like that. But he didn't look like a DJ. And when I say that, I really just mean like when you show up with a laptop to a booth, you're wearing a t-shirt hoodie, a shoodie, or a shirt. It's a shoodie. We're calling it a shoodie from now on. But a short sleeve hoodie, no tats, no nothing. And you start playing bangers, like props to you, bro. Whoever that DJ was at the undisclosed location that I was at this weekend, mad props to you, big ups to you, doing bits. Like if I knew who you were, I'd give you a shout out right now because you were playing so much old school stuff, playing new stuff, playing stuff that people didn't get to vibe out to in public because it came out during quarantine. Like, honestly, you were missing one Bad Bunny song before I was going to lose my mind and just like disregard all inhibitions. But yeah, think about it. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll do the wrap up. And yeah, I mean, it'll be a short show, mainly because I got to film another show because I'm going to be out of the country soon. We'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll do the thing.
P.O.P. Hold it down.
And we're back. You know the truth. But let's get started with the great debate. Last week, that's a time and space. Last week, we asked you guys, is it possible for you to love someone else or for you to properly love someone else before fully loving yourself? And a resounding 82% of you said, absolutely not. There's no way. And you know what? For the yeses, I did get a new perspective on the yeses. And part of it was, I'm not a psychologist, so literally go see a therapist kind of thing. I think some of the yeses came from a good place, like a good-hearted place where these individuals, more or less, through loving and serving somebody else, found out things about themselves that they, in turn, loved more about themselves. That's the best way I could phrase it. But we go back to the no's, the majority. I know how y'all are thinking because I already expressed how I was thinking last week, where you got to have at least some type of foundation built up in your, not in your body. You got to have some type of foundation filled up in your sphere, your mental health, your emotional stability, all that foundation before you can just start pouring into other people. It's that idea that you can't pour into somebody else if your cup is empty. Jesus, that's the same thing. You have to, like, in my opinion, you have to fully love yourself before you're able to then give love to other people. Because if not, you're just giving people, I don't want to say like fake love, but you're giving them like a projection instead of like what could be a full kind of service or full kind of love to them. So think about it. This week, though, I just really want to know, especially after this weekend, are y'all going all out when it's that first weekend back? Like, I mean, if you want to use it as a crass example, my boy Bobby Shmurda gets out of prison, Even Kodak Black did it a handful of years ago, when it's like your first day out kind of thing, your first weekend back out of quarantine. You going ham? Are you going all out? Or are you going to take it easy and just kind of sit on the sidelines and see what's up? And I'm not talking about like partially open, anything like that. I'm talking the first full weekend that everything is at 100% open. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the polls, and we'll talk about it. Maybe next episode, maybe not. Well, with that, we move over to the Friday Follows. This week's Friday Follows, mainly because we're bringing Hornets games back where like fans can go in there and all that stuff. That'll start on March 13th. A special ticket availability for healthcare workers and frontline essential workers, predominantly healthcare workers. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a news source. Don't get your news from me. But the March 11th game for the Hornets will be exclusively for healthcare workers, whereas other fans will be able to start attending games come March 13th. Tickets will go on sale Friday, March 5th to the general public. So do your thing. But because of that, we're going to talk some Hornet stuff with Bring Back the Buzz. Y'all, if you haven't heard of them yet, if you haven't heard them ever, go hit them up. Go to them as your source for all Hornets things. The next business that we're going to shout out this week is No Grease Barbershop. For those of you that are trying to look fly, especially when you get let out of quarantine or let out of restrictions and you're out here on the town, go to No Grease, man. They got you. They'll fix you up. They'll make you look real nice. But yeah, guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. All that good stuff down here, up there, down here. I don't know where things are anymore in relation to space. But yeah, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to follow at Problems on Problems Podcast on Instagram, at Problems_pod on Twitter. And ya boy, follow me at Mike Santi 18 on all social media. And like I always say, guys, if it's not a good time, hope it's a good story. And I will see you next week.